All right, friends, welcome back to the Applied Leadership Podcast. My name is Brandon Young, and as always, I'm joined by Blaine Smith, my partner here. And today we are going to get into a little bit of a meta topic. And the topic is, how do we deal with or engage with the troubles of the world, the macro geopolitical conflicts and tragedies that are unfolding across the world? How do we think about engaging with those while also continuing on with our lives and continuing on to run our businesses, lead our families, engage with our community, love the people that we've been given to love, understanding that there is just extreme tragedy in the world. This is a timely topic for us, and one that we have a lot of very personal experiences with as we are recording this in the beginning of November of 2023, when we are in the wake just a couple weeks ago of the gruesome Hamas terrorist attacks on innocent people in Israel, the war that has now kicked off in Israel, Gaza area, and also in the wake of the terrible shooting that occurred in Maine, just 30 minutes away from where Blaine and Jenny and their family live. So we just wanted to kick this off and kind of get this started, just thinking about how do we navigate this stuff, because it seems like the world's upside down right now. But we as human beings have got to figure out how to keep our feet on the ground and keep moving forward in it. So big topic, and we'll just kind of open it up with that. How do we stay engaged while not being over-engaged in the midst of such tragedy?
This is a topic you and I have talked about a lot over the years, and it seems timely at this moment, but I think we can agree that it's always timely. And maybe that's a place for me to start, is that in an attempt to make peace with some of the things that go on in the world and some of the things that we see and experience that are difficult to get our head around. One way I think about it is we as humans are not really built to know all the information of the world, or to be exposed to all of the troubles of the world, or to feel responsible for all of the people of the world at any one time. And I think we have to recognize that we live in a world now that, as a result of technology, we can be aware of things going on across the globe in real time. We can be exposed to, things that are scary or dangerous or troublesome all over the world. If you go to the nightly news, or you go on the internet, or you go on social media, there's more of that than any one person could take on at any one time. And I think the truth is, at least the way I understand it, is that the world is this way. And there are unfortunate, even tragic things happening in our towns, cities, states, nations, across the globe all the time. And it's kind of been that way for a long time. And it's now perhaps just there's a more pronounced awareness of these things going on. And so we're having to adjust who we are and how we behave with this kind of newfound exposure, maybe recognizing that a lot of the stuff isn't perhaps that new or that novel or that unique to our time. So for me, I like to start there, but I'll admit that doesn't provide me much peace, knowing that I'm just maybe perhaps more aware of the world's troubles now than I used to be, doesn't allow me to kind of look away from them or forget that they're happening. And so that's really where the struggle is. I think, on one hand, I don't think we can throw our hands up and say, look, we're screwed. There's too much. We can't do anything about it. The world's too big. Problems are too vast. It's intractable. And you just become a nihilist, basically, and say, what does it all matter? We're all going to die in the end anyway. I don't think that's a healthy approach to life. And I think there's plenty of reasons we could get into there. On the other hand, I think it's almost equally problematic to feel burdened or responsible or even capable of solving all the world's ills, saving every child, curing every disease, and feeling like if you're not able to do that, then you're not doing enough. I don't think that's a good way to go about it either. So that leaves us, Brandon, with a vast middle ground, I think, by which we have to navigate. And that in some ways is life, understanding that, the world, the universe is this big, vast place that's almost entirely out of our control. And a lot of it is not so good or scary or dangerous. But also that we have a role to play in our lives and how we impact those around us and how we kind of comport ourselves as individuals. And that really, really matters. And you and I have talked a lot about, you want to get really meta, about real life philosophies. And, there are maybe only two things that I really deeply, deeply, deeply believe are true. Everything else, I think I'm open to interpretation, but I feel like, the universe is an incredibly vast place, and my role in it is infinitesimally small, and I don't understand most of it, and I probably never will. And so there's a great deal of mystery that I have to be willing to accept for me to kind of carry on personally. And I believe that we're all interconnected in some way, even if I don't understand it. And so therefore I feel like the way I behave, how I choose to spend my time, where I place my attention and effort does matter. And nothing I do is completely insignificant, because everything I do does have some interconnectedness and impact on others around me and on the world around me, even if I can't deduce exactly what that is. And so for me, that's it. There's this huge mystery, but there's also this huge kind of unity. And, figuring out how to reconcile those two things is the super high level kind of meta place for me to start, and then kind of go from there. So I'm curious, like big picture, how do you think about all of this?
Yeah, wow. Well, this is a great place to start. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to tackle this in 30 minutes. In fact, I'm sure we're not going to be able to tackle this in 30 minutes. But I think that you hit on a couple of things. I was just listening, and one of the fun things about us doing this podcast is that, we kind of give people a window into how we create together and how we think about things and talk about things. And as I listen to you, there are these categories that kind of emerge. The first one being a category of finitude, recognizing our limitations as humanity, as human beings in this vast, unsearchable reality that we live within. And so, you have these dynamics that emerge, is that immediately when we're in these situations, we are confronted with our finitude as human beings, because we are confronted with the reality that I can't save the people who have been slaughtered in Israel. I can't save the children who have been, killed in Maine. I can't do anything about that. I wish that I could, but I can't. And so that then immediately brings about, when you're confronted with your finitude, I think that's what starts to ignite or open up the exploration of the infinite, the exploration of the eternal. And that's where, you've shared some of your concepts about the things that like vast universe, it's mostly mystery, and unity, there is connection across the others. I think that is a natural exploration of the quote unquote eternal, as we are confronted with our limitations and our finitude. And so I think that's one area that necessarily gets, brought up and brought about this. And, just as equally for me, there are things that I am, certain about. We always throw around the word certain in jest, because you always got to be careful. But there's only a couple things that I know to be true. And, I completely affirm, and this is one of the fun things about our relationship, is that we're both very spiritual men, and yet we also engage with this in some different ways, right? And so I completely agree with the mystery. I completely agree, with the broadness of of the universe and also the interconnectedness. And that's where, one of the core truths for me is where I see God in all of this. I see, I see an intelligent design in all of this, where I look at it and I say, there's just no way. And no way any of this is just by chance. I just, along with all of the great thinkers from millennia, whether it be through Stoicism or Greek philosophy or, Jewish or Christian or Muslim thought, the overwhelming statement is that it just is kind of irrational to not think that there's some kind of intelligent design behind all of this. And so I really look at that and I say, okay, well, if I'm finite, then what is infinite? And that's where I kind of have to surrender a little bit, release to God what I cannot do anything about, what I can't control. I can't save, these people, but then also thank God for creating and knitting inside of me a heart that is connected to others, that is connected, to the pain, that sympathizes with the fact that, there are people who are just being brutalized right now. That is saddening. That is sickening. It's absolutely sickening, and I feel like that's that interconnection that, that you talk a little bit about. And, for me, I know anybody that knows me, and if you've been paying attention or reading to anything that I have written or anything like that, you'll also know that I am another thing that I am certain about is Jesus Christ. I'm a follower of Jesus. And so I look to those examples, that revelation that, God has brought into creation. I look to those kind of examples as to what do I do about this? Yeah. What can I do about this? And one of the things that I love so much about Jesus, about, my Lord, is that you always see this consistent engagement with the people who are on the outside, the people who are hurting, the people who are the crippled, those who have been pushed out of society, any of these categories. I don't want to get too deep down the rabbit hole there, but you see a consistent engagement with, compassion for, an offer of salvation, of support, of help. And it's the offer that is extended consistently. And that's where, again, one of the things that you said at the beginning here in terms of finitude, again, I said finitude, but is we're only responsible. We can only control so much. What we can control is how we respond to life out there. What we can control is, do we respond to those invitations or not? Do we respond to that pit in your stomach when you see, these reports or images or not? And that relates to another component that you brought up. There are two other mega themes. The next one that I want to touch on is apathy. Is do you get into apathy? Do you go the nihilist way, or do you get into enmeshment, which is kind of the way of just, it's almost like the way towards the couch with a bucket of ice cream, because I can't imagine anything else when you're just in so much pain. I love ice cream, everybody, by the way. But, or do you find a way to engage appropriately and yet also continue to live your life, knowing that you hold this tension of compassion and hurt, while also there has to be hope, like where is the hope in all of this? And that's where I go back to the eternal. My hope is in the eternal. Yeah. My hope is in Jesus. My hope is in God. My hope is in transcending that there is going to be an end to the suffering. I do believe that unequivocally, right? And I think that the other thing, just so I don't go too deep down any of those rabbit holes, there was a third category that you brought up that I think is really important, and it relates to what do we do? And that is, there's a difference between exposure and engagement. We're exposed to a whole lot of stuff right now, but how we engage, or whether or not we do engage with it, or in what degree we engage with it, I think is a really important factor to keep in mind right now in the midst of all of this. Mm-hmm. And I'm I will tell you that, just 2 hours ago, I got off of my, biweekly therapy call with my therapist that I've been with for a very long time. And, one of the things that, she kind of gave me the old fist bump and said, keep at it. You're using your tools. You're doing a great job. And one of the things that she reminded me of is be aware of how much you are engaging with this information and how much you're going down kind of that path, while also acknowledging that you do feel deeply shaken by this. We don't want to dissociate from that because that's not going to go away, but we also don't want to just mire in it and just, get stuck in all of that and keep reading the news cycle, because the truth is, you know what, man, like I got a family to lead. I got a business to run. I got partner that, relies on me. I got partners out there that, are relying on us to do good work. Like, we have a life to live, and that's the thing. And we're a whole globe away, half a globe away. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just a lot, right? It's a lot.
Yeah.
And it hits you fast too.
Yeah. I mean, it hits you emotionally. You mentioned like you feel it in a certain kind of way, and to some degree you almost can't help the way you feel, at least initially. And maybe there are some things you can do to guide yourself to a healthy place when this kind of stuff is going on. I appreciate your perspective. It's one of the favorite things about our relationship for me as well, is the fact that we share so much in common in terms of our values and the way that we view the world and the impact we want to make. And you do it sort of through your lens and in your way, and I do it in a different way, and we can respect each other and walk down the road together and share a common voice on so many things, while respecting that we just sort of do it from a different place at times. And I think honestly, if a third party looked at it very closely, they'd be like, you're just talking about the same stuff and using different language, more or less, which I'm okay with. But maybe to shift this into what can we do? So we've talked a lot about how we feel, what can we do? And I was telling you before we were recording, I've been working on a talk for a group that will have received the talk before this kind of sees the light of day. But I've been thinking a lot about this, especially with speaking to our fellow veterans, people that have served in the military and have, put themselves at risk, have done quite a lot, and have to transition and shift into a world where it doesn't always make sense to them. And at times you can feel like what you did while you were in uniform, or perhaps while you were overseas or while you were in combat, doesn't feel like it aligns well or jives with what you're seeing in the world now. And I'll just give you kind of the 4 points that I want to encourage these people to think about, and maybe they'll be good for everybody. So the first of them is, I think you have to stay in the fight. I don't think you can allow yourself to be totally discouraged or dissuaded or otherwise convinced that you don't matter or that you can't make a difference. I know it can feel that way, but I know for sure, because of the way my life has gone and the things I've been able to be involved in, that you do matter and you can make a difference, even if it's not solving all the world's problems overnight. So you just got to stay in the fight. You cannot allow yourself to be totally checked out or apathetic, as you would say. So that's the first one. The second one I would say is, you do have to look things that you don't like in the eye. I don't think that we can allow ourselves to look away or pretend that the things in this world that we don't like are not happening. We do, I think, have to acknowledge that there is injustice, there is suffering, there are people who are less fortunate. There are things going on, whether it's in our household, in our place of work, in our communities. When we see things that we can feel are just not right, we need to look at them and acknowledge them. And maybe we can put them in what Warren Buffett would call the too hard bucket. Maybe we have to put some of those things aside and say, I can't work on that right now. But we don't want to delude ourselves into thinking that they're not true, because we're uncomfortable looking at it. So I think that's the second thing, is we do have to look these things in the eye. The third thing I would say is, do what you can. Commit to doing what you can in small steps. Teddy Roosevelt said, you do what you can, where you can with what you've got. And I think that's an important and a powerful statement, because most people will be stunned at the power of doing a little bit at a time, consistently over time. Not only do sort of pennies make dollars and ounces make pounds, but the power of compounding is, frightfully amazing in terms of what you can accomplish by chipping away at things and doing a little at a time. And so I would recommend everybody, find one thing that you think you can make an improvement on. Again, whether that's in your personal life or in your place of work or in the world around you, and start small, shrink the world down, control what you can, and start doing something that you believe is moving the needle in the right direction. And then the fourth and maybe final point I would make in doing all of this is you can't do it alone. We tell people all the time, Brandon, when we're out on the road talking to clients, that you don't go it alone. It feels at times when you're a bit overwhelmed or things feel totally out of control, that your situation is unique, that you're kind of uniquely suffering from this or whatever. But the truth is, that's never the case. Other people are struggling with the same things. They're suffering with the same things. And even if they're not, they're on your team. They're there to help you. And so whatever that looks like for you, whether that's your family, your coworkers, your business partner, the friends in your community, fellow veterans, maybe in our case, don't feel like you have to go it alone. Lean on people when you need to. Ask for help. If you and I can do a little bit on our own, we can do 3, 4, 10 times as much if we're able to do it together, to share ideas, to pool resources, to do all that. Not to mention we're able to buoy ourselves kind of emotionally and psychologically as we go try to do hard things that might take a long, long time to get done or might progress painfully slowly. You're going to have a low moment on that 50-mile foot race at a little bit of a different time than I'm going to have my super low moment. And if we're doing it together, we can pick each other up. It's the old Native American phrase, go fast, go alone, go far, go together. I think that's incredibly important. So if you're looking to no kidding what to do, those are kind of the 4 things I would say you can lean on as a bit of a framework, and what they are specifically for you and your situation. Those are deeply personal. Those are really up to you. But I think if you approach it in that way, you can start to take bites out of the elephant in a manageable way that keeps you both contributing positively and, sane and not totally overwhelmed by the enormity of, all the world's challenges.
Yeah, there's so much good in what you just shared. I mean, so many gems there. And as always, our partners are very lucky that they get to hear from you shortly here. So I'll just say that. But I can't help but reflect upon my travels that Kelly and I just got back from as we think about this. And so just to kind of bring that 4-part framework maybe into life, into what that might prospectively look like. And there are some unique aspects of that I don't want to lose sight of. I'll just tell a little story. So Kelly and I just got back. We did about 2 weeks in Europe. Part of that was on a cruise. Part of it was, on a boat and on land and dipping in and out of different ports of call. And we visited Italy, Greece, Turkey, and Croatia. It was a wonderful trip celebrating 22 years of marriage. And, I think 2 days before we landed in Istanbul, they were having protests outside, like anti-Israel protests, pro-Palestine, protests and all this kind of stuff. And for those of you that don't know who are listening, I am a Jew, and I, born Jewish and all that good stuff. I also, as you've obviously heard, if you've been listening to the beginning of this, I'm a Christian. So we can get into that in a whole different conversation, but that's not the point. Point being is that it hurts me at a deep level to see what's going on over there, especially knowing one person removed from people who are living over there and all that good stuff. And I thought about maybe I shouldn't get off the boat and, go into this environment. If you're not aware, Istanbul is, as the song says, Istanbul was Constantinople. So once the center of the Byzantine Empire, then transformed as the center of the Ottoman Empire. So you go from a Christian to a Muslim kind of empire and influence. The area is about 85% Muslim. And we were kind of going through, some of these things. We decided to get off the boat, engage, go through all of this. And I had feels, I really had feels. And I could have kind of just like curled up, stayed in our, stateroom or whatnot, and just said, let's mail it in or whatnot. This was a little bit of my ability to stay in the fight, I think. And I think part of staying in the fight is actually living your life. Is to acknowledge, like, yes, there's protests going on there, but you know what? There's protests going on 45 minutes north of me where my daughter's going to school at in Boulder. So I can either choose to engage or not to engage. And if I'm sitting here talking to my daughter saying, hey, continue to march, do what you need to do, stay engaged, and I'm getting off the boat and we're going to Istanbul. And so we're walking around, we're doing our kind of thing, and we ended up doing a locals tour with a young man named Mohammed. He was 22 years old, and for me, this is a little bit part of, maybe it's a little bit of how God's knit me together, or maybe it's just a little bit in line with doing what I can do and staying engaged. But, having conversations with a young man who is a Muslim young man. He's grown up right there in Istanbul, in this neighborhood of Istanbul. And there was this moment through this tour where we kind of were sitting over Turkish coffee, which, whoa, that'll wake you up. And, sitting there chatting with this young man, it was a very sweet experience for Kelly and I, because by all accounts, we should be worlds apart. Right? I am a Jew and a Christian. He is a Muslim. I am American. He is, Turkish. Just by a factor of that, there's probably a lot of stuff. I'm 44. He's 22. Much kind of separates us in this regard, right? And one way that I try to kind of stay in the fight is just engaging, engaging with life, engaging with people, and particularly engaging with people who pretty much look like we should be worlds apart on a lot of things. And in this moment over Turkish coffee, overlooking the city, the topic of Israel came up, and the topic of what was going on out there. And, this young man, it's one of the reasons he reminded me so much of my son, Jaden, is he just asked me, so what do you think about it? It just completely direct, unflinching. It was so
just
great.
Laid the mousetrap right out in front of you.
Yeah, and so I'm sitting there, and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty shaken up by it. I'm very troubled by it. I'm sickened by it. I'm sickened by these acts of terror, and I can only imagine how the people over there are feeling. And I said, innocent people, right? I have no illusions about the fact that there are kind of like three parties involved here. You've got, Israel, you've got Palestinians in Gaza, and then you've got Hamas. And I just as much feel terrible for, these innocent civilians in Gaza who are sitting here, and, havoc, loss of life, right? Disgusting. It's terrible. And I didn't really know how I was going to, receive that, especially after walking past a sign, right off of the port of call in Istanbul that was calling Israelis baby killers. And this young man really, frankly, surprised me, because he said to me, I've always been pro-Palestine my whole life. And that's kind of what this culture, it's about. Like, I'm pro-Palestine for sure. And I got to tell you that after seeing the terrorist attacks that Hamas committed, I can't see how anybody would think that that's okay. I just don't, I can't even, it doesn't even make sense to me. I can't even. And it was this point right here in the conversation that was really impactful for me. And why I think it's so connected to these 4 points that you have shared with all of us to consider. Because what this young man did right here, frankly, was fairly courageous. might have been considered counterculture, in his sphere of influence, in his community. And I think that it relates so closely because in that moment, I think you have two people, three of us, Kelly was there, all three of us were just kind of sitting there, confronting what we don't like right in the eye, looking at it right in the eye, and doing what we can do. And I think what's important about this is that before you get to the learning, I think it's important to take time for the grieving. Grieve, feel, experience, really experience that, which I think we have lost, the capacity or the willingness, or I don't even know what to say, in the world today. But it seems like so counterculture to actually grieve, wail, moan, feel some of that pain before you get to the learning. We're so quick to get to the learning. Well, what do I need to learn from it? Well, hold on.
The judging, maybe not the learning,
Yeah, exactly. Before we judge it, can we just grieve? Can we just actually be unequivocal about the wrong that we have seen and actually just pause and grieve, because people have been slaughtered in such a disgusting fashion, right? Which I will just minor thought. What troubles me is that most of the stuff that I read right now, and I just stop reading it, is that maybe a paragraph in we're talking about political dynamics. That's sickening right now, in my opinion. We're not there yet. Okay, slow your roll. Let's talk about what happened, grieve a little bit. And then the last part, that you brought about that I just really appreciated this young man's heart is you can't do it alone. And I think the reality of it is what can we do? I don't know. I don't know what we can do, but I do know that being willing to grieve and not go it alone, not just with the usual suspects, the veterans, me going to the Christians or anything like that, the people who might not be the usual suspects in your life or in your community. I think that might be a really significant way that we can start to, turn the tide on some of these kind of tragedies. And I don't want to get on a soapbox here about, the ins and the out crowds and all this kind of stuff. That's not my point. My point is that I was pleasantly surprised to see that this young man, who is a world apart from me in terms of a lot of things probably, we can come together and both agree that this is something that we can grieve for together. This is not right. This is sickening and sad.
Yeah. I mean, I think our ability to see the humanity, remain focused on the humanity, is really important. And maybe I would just wrap up by saying that while I do think we have to acknowledge the fact that there is tragedy, injustice, so many of these horrible and kind of ugly things about the world, and no doubt the various media sources are happy to put them right in our face all the time to keep us all kind of hopped up in a frenzy. I do think we also have to do our very best to be proactive at looking for the beauty and the humanity and the possibility in the world. Because that is there too. And it's an and. That's, for me, the biggest thing, is that we don't have to take it as an or. We don't have to put ourselves in hey, the world's just ugly and brutal and unfair and we're screwed and there's nothing we can do about it. And I don't think we can be Pollyanna and say, the world is just full of light and possibility and beauty and it's everywhere you look. Neither of those, I don't think, at least for me, are effective approaches. But if we can, do the hard work of acknowledging both, then I think we can move forward, because we can't fix anything that's broken by pretending nothing's broken. We also can't fix anything that's broken if we fail to see the humanity and the beauty and the possibility of what we might be able to do if we stay in the fight, if we stay engaged, if we work together, and if we focus our energy on what we can actually influence. A lot easier said than done. And again, deeply personal, how you want to walk your trail. But I think that's really the only useful approach that I have found. And I want people to feel encouraged. I hope they And I hope they want to pick themselves up after they've had a chance to take a deep breath, and do the very best they can. And whether that's living their life in a very private way, or whether that's getting involved and trying to move the needle on something in a more public way. That's for each of us to decide. But I hope folks feel encouraged and capable of doing that. I guess that's my message.
Yeah, and I think if we were putting this into a module, we might even kind of say, here are some final takeaways as we close up this time. Is there are a couple key principles that we talked about here. One, the confrontation of your finitude and being willing to inquire of the infinite, because it's there inside of you. It's there inside of all of us. We all ask why, that bottomless question. But that's kind of number one. One of these things, these tragedies tend to bring about that as kind of a first stop. Second stop is to consider exposure and engagement. Just because we're exposed to a bevy of information doesn't mean that it is good for us to continue constant engagement with it. So being willing to measure your exposure versus your willingness to engage and how deeply you will engage, and giving yourself time to kind of step back and get a little bit of headspace and calm your system down a little bit from what is going on. The third kind of mega principle that I think we talked about is that dynamic of apathy versus enmeshment, not going so far to the side of, the nihilistic bent of all is lost, nothing matters, I'm completely apathetic and I'm just dead or blocked off, to the other side, which is just an over-enmeshment, an over-engagement, an overexposure where I'm just completely rocked to the core and limited. And mind you, we say this from the comforts, of our homes right now in the United States, and recognize that there are people who are dead smack in the middle of tragedy right now that don't have quite that ability. That's a whole other conversation and topic. Sure. So I just want to honor that and acknowledge that. And then the kind of framework of, so what can we do with all of those in mind? I think you've laid it out beautifully, Blaine. 1, stay in the fight. 2, look things you don't like in the eye. Number 3, do what you can. And number 4, don't go it alone. Do not go it alone. And so, guys, we hope that this has been an encouraging episode for you guys. As we have said, we definitely have a lot of feels about it. And this is one of the things that we feel we can do. And one of the things that we feel that we can do together and not go it alone in. And so hopefully this has been a blessing to you. Hopefully it's encouraged you. It has certainly encouraged and been a blessing to me, Blaine, just to kind of talk over this stuff with you. And we will see you guys on the next go-around. If you have any thoughts, questions, observations that you want to send in to us, holler at us, guys. Send us a note at contact@appliedleadershippartners.com. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks a ton for listening.